Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. There may be swear words used on today's episode, so if this offends you or upsets you, then you might want to check out one of the other 200-odd episodes available on the show. Today, I'm very happy to welcome special guest Katie Turner, who's here today to talk about the way through is through. And some of us think we know what that means, and we're going to find out today what Katie means by that, which is a very particular connection she has with that. Katie is a registered psychologist, a speaker, and the author of Fuck Toxic Spirituality, Avoiding Red Flags and Navigating the Spiritual Path with Integrity, which quite honestly, that is such a live and current topic at the moment. I've seen so many threads online of people arguing about toxic spirituality and accusing each other of toxic spirituality. So I just think it's fascinating that Katie's made this book on the particular topic. So you can find Katie at katieturnerpsychology.com, and that's KatieTurnerpsychology.com. So Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
So this book you've written, I mean, that's a very bold title and it's a really kind of potent topic. How did that come about that you created that book?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear you say people are talking about it online. For me, I've been seeing it. My therapy practice is really specialized in depth therapy. I train in transpersonal psychology as well. So I do a lot of work with spirituality, spiritual awakenings. I have a lot of clients who have a spiritual practice or it's part of their life. And over the last decade, I've just seen so many repeating themes and people talking about things in their therapy sessions, things either from their spiritual communities or stuff online or these kind of like watered down manifestation technique stuff. So in the book, I talk about this whole range of stuff that can be really harmful for people, whether it's just well-intentioned and misinformed and more on that toxic positivity side and like, oh no, only positive thoughts, like you manifested this, and like how that's was way oversimplified and not very helpful to even some of the red flags in terms of not everyone in that space is really necessarily going to be helpful and some people can be really harmful there. So, and because in terms of spirituality, and I went through my own spiritual awakening too, so I found a lot of this when I was trying to navigate that and figure out what was going on. And there are many more and more professionals who do have spiritual experiences, but very few people talk about it publicly. So most of the people who are online, or if you Google it, I call it the Wild West of answers that you get, because you'll get a lot of different, maybe life coaches, like, and there's coaching. I have nothing against coaching. I'll say that for sure. For one, like I've worked with coaches. There's some incredible coaches out there. But because it's not a regulated industry, you have such a range of things. Like someone could do a weekend course and call themselves like a coach. Someone could just call themselves a coach and have zero training at all. And so I think people seeing some of these things that people are saying online or these videos, and some people have really large followings, and there's some stuff they're saying is just, it seems really misinformed or just downright wrong. And I mean, there's helpful stuff out there too, but I think it's hard for people to know how to navigate that. So I just found myself saying over and over again with clients it's like, well, how would you know this? There's no manual, there's nothing when you're going into this spiritual world, there's no roadmap in terms of what do you need to look out for and what do you need to be checking in on, because oftentimes we're looking for help and we can make mistakes of, oh, if you're spiritual and you're sharing all these really like loving concepts, like you're probably a good, safe person and self-aware or maybe more evolved person to work with. And that's not always true. Like there can be dangerous personality types or just people who aren't like aware of their own shadow stuff and don't have the proper awareness or training, and their ego's getting too involved in it. And there's things like boundary exploitation, whether it's like financial pressures, like inappropriate relationships, even sexual assault or abuse that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because you're including what you might call malicious behavior, the abuse type behavior. But most of what you were talking about there sounded more like unintentional potential of harm, where somebody just is not well informed or not experienced or just hasn't done the work or that has enough awareness. I mean, of course, we also get people who've done all the training and who are just not good coaches.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to someone a while back who'd done quite a lot of work on one-to-one work, etc., and then they've gone off and done some business coaching training. And they came back and said, yeah, I think I was quite good at it. I've learnnt it, quite well. He said, there's just one thing that I think could get in the way for me, which is I'm not really very interested in other people.
He's like, probably not the right fit then.
We both burst out laughing at this point. I went, okay, not your path, right? There's paths. So I think that's another very interesting thing, because people talk about regulation, don't they? As if regulation actually solve everything.
Yeah, and I do speak to that as well. And like, I don't think just because there's professional regulation, there's still problematic behavior there. It's just there's more checks and balances in place. And if people are crossing lines, it's like they do know better because they've been trained and taken exams, and now they're like they on some level they know they're crossing that. Whereas I think not just in the spiritual space, but in working in such deep levels with human nature, I do believe most harm in the world is we're doing the best we can with where we're at, and we don't know what we don't know. So I don't think most of it's like evil or malicious, but there can still be harm. And with mental health and some spiritual principles, there is in any area of knowledge, when we know a little bit, we think we know more than we do. And so sometimes I think there's pieces where people are like, oh, I had this experience, or like, this seems to really fit for me. And that may be helpful for some people, but it's not enough training to know like what actually applies to the majority. What are the nuances here? I mean, one of the things comes to mind for that is people talk about like empaths and narcissists, and there's so much misinformation out there in spiritual spaces with it.
Do not get me started. I actually did a solo episode recently about the fact that people have overused the word narcissism. And I was actually called a spiritual narcissist online recently, using the term poverty consciousness.
Right.
That I was evil and bad, and I was given a real slating for using that term. Okay. But it was, and that was like one of those examples of people getting into a whole lather about something and completely missing the point of the original point, and that can then get very nasty. And I've seen that can happen in the world of working with spirituality. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's always nuances to it, but I think sometimes there can be this piece of, one of the things that comes up for me around that is I've seen people get really isolated or even shamed and stigmatized by their like really close contacts who are spiritual, or their spiritual communities, when they're struggling. There may be this piece of, I mean, some spiritual communities, again, not all, are really more, they're so focused on the, okay, here's your thoughts, like here's change your vibration, meditate, visualize. And those can be really helpful techniques for many people, but as human nature, we're really complicated. We're multi-layered. Like we have our history, our own trauma, our genetic predispositions. And I do believe my own spiritual awakening I really strongly believe in experience of we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but sometimes some spiritual areas can go too far into just the spiritual and kind of bypass the human part of it. And it's like we are still in this nervous system. And maybe there is a place where we can transcend that and become this enlightened being where we have now we can make our body do whatever it wants and like heal at will. I'm not there. I don't know anybody personally who is. And I think most people I encounter, I'm like, you're not there either. So it can get into the shame or stigma of like if someone's considering medication or hormone replacement therapy in menopause or perimenopause, and they're really suffering and they're doing all the things already, but it's not enough. Is I think a holistic approach. Some communities can take holistic to mean like only mind spirit based, and you're not allowed to treat like no Western medicine, no hormone replacement, no this. And it's well, these are all the tools that are available to us, and there is the body. And a lot of these approaches can actually be a part of a holistic plan and really help somebody. And things like telling a trauma survivor, like a complex trauma survivor, or like someone with PTSD, of like, oh, just like don't think negative thoughts, or it's like it doesn't work that way. Our nervous system is evolved to keep us safe, and there are trauma responses that we cannot consciously control. Like we need to work with it in a different way and have more safety in our nervous system. I also think like, and I've had experiences too around messages coming in around like your soul signed up for this lesson or this is part of your soul growth. But sometimes that we're also at the same time, we're also human and we have human emotions. And there's still stuff that it's like, this is unjust. It's not okay. It's not right. This shouldn't be happening. So, on that theme of like the only way out is through, or the only way through is through, sometimes it's like, oh, well, this should just like, you should just, it's fine. Your soul signed up for it, or your kid's soul signed up. So, you shouldn't be upset or feel these like difficult emotions with it. And part of the human experience is we do need to move through those. It's not less spiritual to feel those things. And I think a spiritual connection can really help us be a source of comfort and move through it. But there's like I live in that reality where I'll often get stuff of like, this is the lesson here. It's showing you this. And there's still the personality part that's like, oh, I hate this. And I want to like, I still need to cry and like move this through my body. And like this can help me keep going later, but it's often we need both, and we need times to just be human and feel the emotions, and then there's times where that spiritual help is helpful, but just piling that on people and not allowing them to feel it is really harmful.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's just another way of actually not being holistic, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's a way of saying, no, you have to do it this way. And as you say, we are so multifaceted, but
Mhm.
all sorts of different things might be helpful for us at different times and for
Yeah,
different people in different ways.
for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking of an example recently of a friend of mine who um, you might call a spiritual practitioner,
Hmm.
who just recently realized that for financial pressure reasons,
Hmm.
what she needs to do is actually stop doing that for a while,
Hmm.
go and do something else and just rebuild
Yeah.
her foundation
Yeah.
in terms of material
Yeah.
things, and then hopefully circle back later on.
Hmm.
Yes. And some people would look at that and go, oh, no, you're denying your calling, you're denying your true mission. But actually, I don't think so. I think she's
Hmm.
actually being authentic to the
Hmm.
real situation that she's in, but without losing her actual connection to her.
Yeah, and that's very like I respect that as well too, because I talk about kind of planifesting in the book too, or sometimes it's like the manifesting is, oh, I have this desire, like I want to start a business, I want to heal, and people can jump right in with no physical plan. And I think there's a time and place for both. And people can get into trouble. Like that's where sometimes if people are really in a financial pressured situation and they're not okay at that fundamental level, they're not meeting basic needs, that work can get messy with clients because now you're way more attached to them working with you. And I've seen bad examples, clients coming to process like exploitive relationships they've had with other people, like coaches or others, where they're pressuring them or putting like they're sharing things about their financial situation of like, I need to do this kind of thing. And the person's all like torn. And that should never be where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing, if someone comes for an initial session and you say, have you enjoyed the session? Yeah, it's been really, really useful. Excellent. Well, what I need you to do now is sign up for 10 sessions
Yeah.
because given the nature of what we're working with, if firstly, you should never tell someone how many sessions they should sign up for, should you? But
No, I think there's a balance between, and I talk about that in the book too, between sometimes there's a balance between a practitioner saying, like, from my professional experience, I mean, take complex trauma, for example, that is longer term work. Someone saying, to get where you want to go, this is kind of the process that this is going to take. This is what you can expect. This is kind of who I'd recommend you working with. And but it's not attachment to, it's really of like, I do think in your best interest, this is what I would recommend you do, but it's not attachment to you working with me specifically. And I also think there's a balance of if what you're offering or your business model and what you need to support yourself, if they can't financially afford that, it's not pressuring them of like, oh, you're not serious about doing the work then, because there are real financial pressures people face of living in a material world. There's privilege and societal access areas too, and there can be other services that can help somebody, and there's ways they can continue their work in a budget that works for them.
absolutely. And the other thing is, like my friend I just mentioned, she's going away to deal with that side of things and prioritize it for a period of time.
Yeah.
We can't necessarily do everything all at once, can we?
No.
So we have to sort of prioritize what's the thing that is called for next or that's indicated next.
Yeah, and I don't think our purpose is just the work we're doing and what we're getting paid for. Like, our purpose is we're having a spiritual being having a human experience here. It's the multifaceted experience. And I do think we get there can be some soul holes in that come with our natural desires, where we feel a sense of purpose and passion. But I don't think it always has to be through paid work, and that can put too much pressure on people. Like, sometimes it's just the energy, it's who we're here to be, it's the qualities, the maturity and the growth we bring in ourselves, the relationships we have.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I actually was able to I went for a walk this morning before starting work. And as I was walking, I was just thinking, okay, what if the primary purpose of my life was to be walking across this field?
Mhm.
How would that throw the other things I'm doing into a different perspective? I just sort of did that. And it was really refreshing, actually. I mean, I don't think that the primary purpose of my life is to walk across that particular field. But of course, in that moment, that was the primary purpose.
Yes.
It was interesting what you've just said, that I had that experience this morning and just found that very, very liberating, because it's easy to think, oh no, my primary purpose is my contribution, my service, and everything else is just sort of peripheral. That's unbalancing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And we have these subtle, almost like capitalistic influences in spiritual spaces, like especially like white culture spiritual spaces. Again, a lot of the manifesting stuff is very ego-based and material based. So again, it's like, what's your purpose? What work are you doing, and how are you monetizing that? And most of us have probably gone to some kind of vision board or manifesting workshop where it's like, visualize the $2 million check and the this, and nothing against the financial abundance. I do think there's clear research that people who have enough to meet their basic needs, like, that is a clear psychological difference in happiness. And so I do believe in universal accessibility for like basic needs services, but beyond that, money doesn't actually necessarily improve our life, or the relationship's more complicated. It's really more about like, does it give us more time to do the things that are valuable to us, in terms of our core values and deeper meaning. And so, and in that soul purpose wise, it's not just about like, okay, I have this money. Because I think in my experience with kind of the intuitive awakening is the sense of really knowing and feeling that we are part of this bigger whole, like unconditionally loving field, whether you call that like source, God, universe, whatever someone's name is for that. And sometimes this piece of like, oh, if I have all this money or I win the lottery, it's like, then I can feel safe. It's like, that's still dependent on the money or something else, versus like, this is a co-creative relationship that I can continue to turn to for guidance, continue to kind of let me know what I need to know when I need to know it. And it's not dependent. The safety is almost within ourself and that connection versus like something external that can change or be taken from us.
Yeah. Yeah. I can 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
And I tend to emphasize that emphasis in life.
Yeah.
I am very much unattached to material wealth as a result.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I don't appreciate
Yes.
a beautiful piece of jewelry or a beautiful prepared meal, which might have ingredients in it, beautiful clothing or something like that. But those things are not core to the sense of validity and happiness in life.
For sure.
They're part of the tapestry of what can be enjoyed.
Yes. Yeah. Not the purpose itself at the expense of other things.
Yeah. So coming back to our theme of the way through is through, I was kind of curious. Obviously, you are who you are now, doing the work that you're doing now. You weren't born that way. You've traveled the whole journey. Yeah. And I was just kind of interested in, can you remember how and when this awareness and understanding about the way through is through really became present for you in your life? Can you sort of remember to how that happened?
Yeah, I think it's in terms of the way through is sort of like feeling the way through. It was really more, I was already in psychology as a field, but a lot of it was focused on really kind of conscious mind approaches. A lot of the early training I received, at least, was more of like, what's the thought? How do you feel when you think that thought? Okay, tell yourself a different thought, and then how do you feel? And so I found I could analyze a lot of things on a really rational cognitive mind level. But then I felt like something was missing, and it just felt, and I also was like, this doesn't change my own patterns or how I'm feeling. Like the things I'm struggling with, I can analyze them back generations back to be like, oh, from my childhood to this to this. But I was like, but it's still like alive in me, and it's still not like I'm not feeling different. So it was kind of around that time where I ended up getting a one-way ticket to India, and I stayed in India, Nepal for about 9 months and dove deeper into like breath work, yoga, meditation. That's where my spiritual awakening started happening. And I wasn't seeking that consciously at the time, but now I know those kind of practices when we're out of our conscious mind and in that present moment state, it's like that's more likely to open it up. And so it was really finding tools that helped actually be like, how do you connect with the energy that's alive here from the past so that we can feel it and have an emotional release experience? It's like then those patterns start losing their grip. We're not fighting them so much. They're not so energetically alive in our body anymore. And then the work I did really started shifting, because it's not most of the work I do with clients. Sometimes there's a time and place for knowing, almost like coaching or consulting, to say like, okay, if you're dealing with a really difficult personality, if you're suspecting personality disorder traits, like you need to understand what this is so you know what to expect logically. But so many of the people I work with, and I found that for myself, was I could say, this is what I actually want to do or feel in this situation, but that's not how I'm actually feeling. Like this is just, this energy is coming up. And so sometimes we need to get past the conscious story to be like, how do we just kind of feel this in a safe way and move through it? And then change comes from that, because that old subconscious or old trauma response isn't running the show anymore.
Right. So the initial impetus was coming from feeling like there was something missing in the purely kind of cognitive approach to it, but still valuing that approach for what it provide. Yes. And that's very interesting. So you kind of went from there into exploring the kind of meditation, breath work, all of that, and that was your gateway into
that and other more somatic based or trauma based.
Oh, I'd love
training and modality.
Would you share a bit more about that work as well?
Yeah. And so for anyone interested in doing that, I wouldn't say necessarily modality. I'd say find someone you're comfortable with who is experienced and has training in stuff that's beyond cognitive. So that can be, I have a few different trainings or certifications. I use a lot of energy psychology is one tool. Just what I like about it is when you teach people how to do it, they can do it on their own and they don't always need a therapist facilitating it. It's something I use a lot when I notice like, okay, there's some older energy coming up here, or like a deeper emotion coming up. It's often these times where it might be you have an interaction with your neighbor or something and you're really emotionally agitated about it, and your logical mind is somewhere online being like, why do you care so much about this? Like, stop thinking about it. But you can't. Like, something gets hooked into it and you're having this big emotional reaction. Sometimes that may be a sign that there's old emotional memory like blurring into the present moment because there's something that's not kind of fully processed. And part of that human experience part is our brain does process like intense distressing emotional memory different than positive emotional memory. So we can have that stored before conscious memory. We can have these like bigger, intense emotional reactions that we don't fully consciously understand. That awareness piece is the first step, because when we're not aware, we just go around thinking like, oh, how dare they? Like, they made me feel this way. Versus when we're aware, we can be like, wait a minute, like maybe that wasn't okay, or I don't totally agree with what they're doing, but they're bringing something up. Like, this is a mirror to show me there's something within me that's really reacting to this.
Yeah. And then we can actually blame ourselves for overreacting, can't we?
Yeah, yeah.
It's another whole downward spiral.
Yes, exactly. And I think the conscious mind part can start to do harm for people when they're trying really hard, and understanding how our nervous system, like how it's stored in our body differently, really can bring so much compassion and understanding to it, where it's like we all have this, like it's part of the human experience. But when we're aware of it, we can actually work with it and tend to it to see like how do I give the part of myself what it needs, or hold this space so I can just kind of move through this, release it. I'll often use the metaphor of like if a balloon's really filled up and we can just let some of that air out, it's like, oh, okay, there's not so much in there anymore.
Yes, exactly. Great. So you've actually now got quite a few different things in your portfolio of things that you can do with your clients. Do you kind of intuitively bring them to bear as required, or do you kind of offer them out as individual different offerings?
It's always depending on the person and where they're at. It's a combination of clinical experience and intuition. With any therapy, it's really an art and science of there's lots that works out there and has been researched. It's finding the right fit for each person. So, and it's a collaborative process. So the client's always in control of it. If at any point they're like, that's not for me, I'm not interested in doing that, that's respected. So, but because of kind of the way I market and the people who tend to be drawn to the type of work I do, they're usually looking for something deeper. So with people's consent, I use a combination of clinical experience, but also intuition. So I'm not just listening with my conscious mind. I'm also part of my intuitive like spiritual awakening is my own intuitive abilities. And that's another thing I help people with. And so I'm also using intuition. So, because sometimes we're like, I know there's something there, but I don't quite understand what it is. Or our subconscious and unconscious is all about protecting us and keeping us safe. So sometimes we know something's there, but there is also this resistance kind of in the field or in our mind that's like, nope, don't mess with this. This has protected us and kept us safe from a young age, or maybe even for generations. So it's hard to access it. And then, so I'll often use into my own intuitive sense, and like I'll see things, I'll hear things, I can see visions or get a sense of like how old or young things is, if it's theirs or there's something in the family. So I'm kind of a unique, like I have psychic abilities in that as well, but I'll always check in to say like, is this resonating? And I'm more trying to help clients connect with that for themselves, to help increase their own intuitive ability and their own ability to work with that deeper stuff.
Fantastic. So you're juggling, you're kind of incorporating your clinical
Mhm.
experience and knowledge and guidelines,
Mhm.
what you're picking up intuitively,
Mhm.
time to time, what you're picking up psychically as well.
Yeah.
And then also checking in with the client in terms of what we're about to do together, or whether what's coming through for you fits for them.
Yeah.
Now, that's quite a sophisticated blend. isn't it? I mean, how long?
It's a unique skill set. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of training and a lot of investment. Like I'm very trained in a lot of things. So, and that's kind of my own perfectionistic tendencies.
But you've obviously been practicing it for quite some time.
Yeah, I've been doing it for about 20 years. So, yeah. And I typically do more training than is like quite a lot more than is required by our licensure requirements because there is that natural curiosity and draw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it keeps you in a learning and growing space, doesn't it? Which I think is really,
Yeah.
really asking other people to do that.
For sure.
I recently took on a podcast coach actually before Christmas, and this threw me into a complete learning, right? Where I was learning, going to basics on certain things. And it was so interesting how me being in that state of being really stretched and quite challenged really helped me my work with my clients, which was nothing to do with podcasting.
Yeah.
It's to do with other things entirely. But me being in that space, helped me to be really open and flexible enough with clients. I mean, do you find that works for you as well?
Yeah, I find there's almost, because the nature of how I'm always kind of one foot in both worlds of like I'm in the spiritual world and the logical world, grounded in both. And one will be dominant at different times. I mean, I'm not always getting everything. Like I can turn that off, but when people are coming in for that, then it's really coming in strong. And so I think there's the piece of, I often find there'll be certain themes that come up. And so I do feel like a lot of it is guided. Even doing the type of practice I have was very strongly intuitively guided. I never would have thought. I was skeptical before. I didn't believe in any of like energy work, spirituality. I thought maybe placebo effect. So and I do feel like looking back, I'm like, I do feel like there was a thread of like there is some level of soul purpose here for me in this, to get as much out of it and be as motivated to keep exploring, to diving deeper, to have accelerated like how do I kind of master a lot of this as fast as possible. And I'm still always learning, but I mean, it oftentimes guides where I end up training more in, but there'll be periods where I'm like, hey, there's a lot of people coming in with this. I need to understand more. So, and then it might show up in my own life too. I mean, I've done advanced training in like survivors of pathological love relationships. So I kept seeing that like, okay, we're suspecting like high narcissistic traits here, or maybe even full on personality disorder. And this isn't just emotionally immature adults. It's not the overuse of the term. It's like, this is dangerous type people. And so I was like, I need more specialized training in this.
Great. So you're following the prompts of what is flat space. Going off and exploring whatever that is. Fantastic. Well, you must be very, very good at your job, Katie.
I've gotten good. I mean, it's one of those things like I'd say it's always about the right fit for people. So it's when it is the right fit, I love the work to see the results that people get, but I won't be the right fit for everyone too. It's kind of that thing of sometimes that in that discernment piece, sometimes it's not like, okay, this person isn't good at their job, but they may not be the right person for you and they might be really good with other people too.
Just like I suppose in life in general, we might meet a lot of people who are interesting or attractive or fun or where there's wall between us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are the right people to be our best friend.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's this piece of like, we each have our own path and there's nobody, and I do believe we have our own internal guidance system that'll help us find like what the right fit for us is. But just because something works for us doesn't mean it's going to be the right fit for someone else, even with very similar circumstances.
Yeah. I think that's a really good reminder, also to remember, let's say I meet someone who I think is really interesting, who I think could be a friend or maybe a colleague or a partner or something. Doesn't mean I'm the right person for them. Yeah. And that's no negative reflection on me. Is simply the way that it is, and you see that clarity in your work as well, that you're aware that you might be the exact right person for some people and for some people, maybe not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But that's very refreshing.
I'm definitely not for everybody.
Me neither. Well, which is lucky really, because you've only got so much time. In your life, you can't work with everyone, can you?
Yeah, no.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So, do you find sometimes when you're working with clients that you are actually helping them to juggle some of those aspects around the cognitive, the emotional, the energetic, the psychic?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, not for everybody, but I another area special to me for me is highly sensitive people and empathic clients too. So people who really pick up their ability is more feelings like and sensitivity to energy in a more body-based way, whether it's emotional feelings or physical sensations. And sometimes like I didn't know I had that ability till my mid-20s or so. And it was such a light bulb moment when I realized, oh, like my entire internal experience of the world can shift dramatically depending on kind of who I'm paying attention to and instantly. And getting feedback of like that read was actually accurate for people I didn't know. So I was like, how long have I been doing this? And how much of emotions that I always thought were me maybe aren't mine. So I definitely on those when people have that energetic sensitivity, that is something I help them work with in terms of, how do you kind of protect yourself, more energy hygiene, like clearing, protection. And I found through my own journey and working with clients too, I think when we can do some deeper work around some childhood belief systems of just being born as this really like open energetic sponge in a culture and time period where that is not understood, and even really well-meaning parents like don't realize we're doing that, don't our medical and psychology models don't recognize that as a real thing. I believe it is. Again, there's a lot of debate, and that's another area in the field where I see a lot of stuff online where there's not enough research to say definitively with it right now, but I'm like, it might be autism, it might not be. It can be a trauma response. It's not always. Like in my clinical experience, there's multiple pathways to this ability, and there could be multiple things influencing it. And so I see a lot online being like, it's this or it's always that. And it's like, it might be that for you, but it's not that for everybody. So anyway, that was like a sidetrack, but no, I do help people with that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to circle back again. I'm kind of very entertained by the title you chose for your book. How did you come to choose that particular title?
Yeah, I had a couple ones, and then I just asked a few people for feedback, and they're like, "Oh, that's the one." And I was like, "Okay, like I like that one too, but it's a little more in your face. The book is a lot gentler than that. It's not, but it is kind of meant to get attention to say like it is this it's kind of this exacerbation I wrote it out of to be like, "Oh, I'm so tired of these things harming people and just people not knowing." And and I think that piece of finding myself saying so many times of like, well, how would you have known? It's not like there's a guide out there. I was like, well, why don't I put something together so that even though I'm limited on who I can do therapy with in terms of geographical registration requirements, but it's like anyone can read this and then you can use it. You can use the reflection questions to say like, is this stuff coming up? What do I need to look out for? Because the real like of it was more of that piece where I'm like, this is actually crossing a line. There's stuff that's not helpful, but there's the harm that can happen when people are really not well and they have a charismatic following. The amount of damage they can do to people is I've worked a lot with the aftermath of that. And I wanted to put something out there that helps protect people from people like that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there obviously people need to buy the book and read the book and work
They
with.
can get a lot of free stuff too. There's like my website has a free quiz on it. It has some of the some resources from the book that go out for free as a 6-week challenge. One of them is really like some safety checks because again, like there's helpful pieces from the mental health side as well as from the spiritual side, but they tend to be very siloed and very separate. I mean, there is more and more where they come together, but it's not common. So a lot of people, rightfully so, are afraid to bring up things to a psychologist or psychiatrist to be like, I'm talking to my deceased ancestors and angels. It's like, okay, like where do we put that in the DSM model?
And is there a room available in the institution?
That's what people are worried about. They're like, am I going to be put in the padded room? Or they're like, am I going to be given antipsychotics? And a spiritual awakening can be, sometimes it's a very helpful, grounded process that really increases people's resiliency and is helpful and it's not a mental health concern. But I've also seen like spiritual influencers say things like, it's like, oh, it's just a spiritual awakening. It's like sometimes this is actually a mental health crisis and there are spiritual symptoms overlapping. Like sometimes this is a bipolar episode. It could be a sign of schizophrenia. It could be a traumatic break. Like sometimes people's spiritual awakening, if they have a history of unhealed childhood trauma, like it may not be safe to open that up because it can just kind of splinter the ego and then they're not functional. So it's like, it's really individual. And so that's like one of the first things I have is like, is this safe to proceed? If someone you love is going through this and you're like, I'm kind of worried about them because this sounds like off the rocker. It's like, is there a checklist there? It's not meant to replace professional diagnosis, but it's really more of, are you grounded in day-to-day reality? Is your observing ego still online to be like, I know how like quote unquote insane this sounds, so I am careful of who I talk to with it. It's important to have people we can talk with it, but if we think everyone should get it and it's like everyone's experiencing this, then sometimes that's a sign of like there's loss of that observing ego.
Yes, yes. Or that they've just gone temporarily a bit bonkers. I mean, I attended an enlightenment intensive in my
Yeah.
early 20s. It was only
Yeah.
3 days long,
Yeah.
but I came out of it convinced that the solution to everything was that everyone on the planet has to do this workshop.
Yeah.
You know, and I was trying to get everyone to do it. I lost
Yeah.
out lots of friends, or
Yeah.
were they friends? But you know, that kind of whole thing. And it took me a little while to come through and realize, okay, Catherine, that's not actually productive. But for that first period of time, I wasn't actually, what certifiable, but I was definitely behaving outside reasonable
Yeah.
behavior. I think,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and just over, like where the enthusiasm overcomes any kind of empathy or sensitivity for anybody else.
For sure. And I've had my own experiences and my own journey too, where you're like, it's so exciting when you touch that and take like have this experiential piece where you're like, this is so amazing and it's so helpful and I want to share it with people. And then over time, with kind of maturity too, you're like, oh, okay, I have to be in the human and spiritual, and this isn't everybody's path. And again, if people are suffering, like, do they want a spiritual solution here? Or do they want that message? Or do they need you to just hold space and practice empathy in action with them?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Well, it's just endless, really, isn't it? All the different ways of exploring these things. And
Yeah.
I think something I love about the way you express it is how you are very considerate about it. You know, you're prepared to show up fully, unapologetically in all these different realms that you're working with, but equally you're considerate of, is this okay for this person at this point? Are they comfortable with it? So I think that's a lovely, lovely balance. So I think,
Yeah, and I think that's what, like you talk about in the field walking, like that present moment piece. It's like, where is someone at in the present? Like, where are they presently in their journey, and what's going to help
yeah,
where they are presently?
yeah, yeah, beautiful. So I'm just going to shift gear slightly now and just say, if we think about the world, right, there's a lot going on. No one could argue that it is not interesting times, right? And there's a lot of people who are upset about certain things that are happening, and there are people who think there are some good things happening, and there's a lot of people out there who are trying to provide good guidance and support for others, whether they are leaders, practitioners, parents, whatever they may be. Some of those people are listening to us right now. Is there something you'd like to say to those people, either in relation to the whole toxic spirituality topic or in relation to the way through is through, or perhaps both? Is there something you'd like to say to those people?
Yeah, I think there's, with the amount of news we get, social media, there's this piece of there, we've always had hard times in human history. Like that's not new. We weren't exposed to everything all the time. We evolved in these village areas. So our brains and nervous systems are not designed to have this constant bombardment. I also do think that our like the spiritual side of it, it's not meaning like, oh, just everything happens for a reason. So I just get to cover my eyes and ignore like systemic injustice and be like, well, it's fine. Their soul signed up for it. So like too bad. Um, but there is also this piece around, and the field I'm coming from is psychology, which is very like individual focused before social mainly. But I think there's more and more to be like, okay, how do we take care of ourselves so that we're putting on our own oxygen mask first so that we can actually help others. Because if we're going too far into fear and overwhelm and freeze, or just like we're really falling apart and not okay, we're not helping anyone there. So I think that piece of, how do you go for walks? Like, how do you get out of it and connect with like your own intuition, like what is still good? And sometimes there's that guidance of like being the change you want to see in the world. Like the Gandhi quote of, is that right? Or yeah. But it might be those small little ways of like we can't control everything else that's going on, but how can we show up as according to our higher order values? Like, is that just showing kindness to the clerk at the grocery store? Is that slowing down and having more time with our kids? Maybe there's like one particular cause that really pulls us and we volunteer, we donate, we raise awareness there. But I do think when we're really connected, we'll be drawn to like what our purpose is or what our way of helping is. And then it's not getting overwhelmed or paralyzed by all the things, all the causes that need attention, because we can't do everything sustainably.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I felt like going in and it's sort of absolutely making sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot today, Katie, which I thought we probably would. And it's been absolutely fascinating. And I love the work you're doing. And I feel like saying thank you for doing the work you're doing, even though I'm not a client of yours. I feel very appreciative of what you're doing. As I said, we've talked about a lot of things. Has there been a favorite part of our conversation for you today?
Oh, it's nothing in terms of just favorite wise, but I really appreciate, like, I love hearing the synchronicities of the timing to say like more and more, seeing this more and more and the need. And I think that's a piece that's been my experience in terms of trusting the intuitive is sometimes it like we might feel pulled to something we don't fully understand why. It doesn't make logical sense yet. And it's not throwing logical sense out the window. Like, I think that still needs to be on board. But I mean, even before I jumped on this, I got a message from someone that was on a podcast before, and they're like, "Oh, I'm seeing all this stuff. The timing of this episode is so important with all these things coming out in this one spiritual community." And I'm like, I don't even know what this is. But I mean, that guidance or that pull, I think sometimes there is that piece of if there really is a strong spiritual pull for it, it's needed in the collective on some level.
Beautiful,
Mhm.
beautiful. So, final thing I'd just like to invite, if you'd like to, is there some sort of reflection or inquiry question that you'd like to leave with the listeners that they can contemplate over the coming week that may help them connect more fully with any of the themes we've been talking about today?
Yeah, I'd say the one thing I'd say if people are wanting to build more of that internal connection for themselves is, I mean, they can do the quiz to get all the free resources there. But the main thing sometimes can be like we can get stuck in this internal dialogue around like all these worries of like what's going to happen in the world, what's going on here, this. And it might just be an invitation to put it out as a question of like, help me, help guide me, help show me the one next step. Like send that to nature, the universe, God, like whatever resonates for you and be open to like what comes in or what guidance may come because it is like a synchronistic co-creative process. It's a conversation. Like we can put it out there and then the answers can come back. But there is a free will component and the element of asking can really help open things up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Katie, it's been just so great talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So thanks everyone for listening and for watching. That's all for Truth and Transcendence today. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Please do go and check out Katie's website, katieturnerpsychology.com. And please give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, and share with your friends. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. And thanks again, Katie. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.